Okay.
We just need to get a few things onto the tape, okay? Just so that everybody knows who gets to see this later. We are at the Peabody Public Library in Columbia City on February 25th, 2003. And we are about to interview Ben Easter. And my name is Janet Skank. I'm the director of the library. Just to get it on the record, what branch of the service did you serve in?
United States Army.
United States Army. And your rank?
Corporal.
Corporal. And where did you serve?
In Munich, Germany.
Okay. So that's for the record. Now, the rest of this, you're going to be doing the talking. I may ask a question now and then, but we do ask you because we want your story, not mine.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll just start out with some of the questions that they have. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Well, I was neither drafted nor did I enlist. I had a full Navy scholarship to the University of Louisville. I was a midshipman, and they cut naval appropriations, so I was eliminated from the program my second year, and I volunteered to be drafted.
Okay.
In order to be truthful, I wanted to get the GI Bill so I could finish college.
Okay. And were you living in, you said you were at the University of Louisville.
Correct.
Were you living there at the time?
No, I was, after the first year of college, when I lost the scholarship,
I
I went back to Peru.
To Peru. Okay.
In the end.
And where did, when you finally did enlist, volunteer to be drafted, where did you go? Where was the first place you went to?
They sent us down by bus to Fort Benjamin Harrison, and then they almost immediately sent us down to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where they did all the induction testing and so forth.
And do you remember who your instructor was then?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Long time ago.
That's okay. What kind of things did they teach you at boot camp?
Well, that was a little bit unusual too. When I told you we took all the kinds of tests, they took 88 of us who were scored high on the tests in order to put us through a fire direction control school at Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. And it was ordinarily a 12-week course, but they were trying to shorten it to 8 weeks. So that's why I ended up in Camp Chaffee, Arkansas.
Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. How long did you stay there?
16 weeks.
16 weeks. And you, what kind of school was it there again, please?
Artillery, fire direction control.
Okay, and then from there, where did you go?
Well, they gave us 1 week's leave, and well, I should back up a little bit. I found out later that the reason they shortened the course was they were running out of FDCs in Korea, and out of the 88 of us, 88 went to Korea, and 8 of us went to Germany. I was fortunate to be the 20th man, alphabetically.
Is that how they determined it then?
That's how I found out later, yes.
My goodness.
Every 10th man.
Was there anything interesting about either your boot training or your artillery training that stands out in your mind?
Well, you don't want a little humorous one.
Sure.
After being in school for a while, I found out what they were going to have us doing over there, and it didn't sound too safe, so to say. And when they were training us to direct artillery, I looked at there was a burnout tank that was supposed to be what we were firing on, and I could tell it was about, you're supposed to give coordinates and then certain yardage, either plus or minus or left or right, and I missed on purpose, and the sergeant came up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder, and he says, "Nice try, Easter."
So he knew what was going on?
Right.
You're pretty smart. Okay, so Arkansas and then to
Fort Dix, New Jersey.
Fort Dix, New Jersey.
Which was a staging area for overseas.
I see.
was there about 3 weeks, and on a long boat ride to Germany. A long, terrible boat ride.
What made it so terrible?
It was a converted Liberty ship left over from World War II, and if any bad weather came up, they made about 5 knots. The USS United States passed us 3 times on the way over. The cruise ship, the liner, USS United
Slow
States.
then.
Yeah.
Other than it being slow, what was it like on the ship? What kind of conditions were you living in?
From what I was used to, terrible. You were stacked 4 high. The guy above you in the bunk was about foot 18 inches above you, and we were right up in the bow area. So every time the boat hit a bad weather, it rattled and shook and shimmied.
Okay.
And I spent my first Christmas in the Army on board that tub.
But how many other men do you think were there?
And on the board,
Yeah,
we were told about 1,400.
1,400.
But I think that was a little high. But the way we were crammed in, it's possible.
Did you sleep like in hammocks? That's what my understanding.
It was just canvas, stretch canvas.
And that ship took you to Germany,
Correct.
and you went to Munich.
I went to a depot, replacement depot, and from there to the anti-aircraft artillery battery I was assigned to.
Okay. So even though you were in the Korean War, you never really got to Korea because of the luck of the draw.
Right.
It's my understanding there was no other combat outside of Korea then.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
So you didn't really see, you didn't see any combat.
No combat, but there was always the threat of it
That's true.
because the Russians were not too far away.
That's true. Did you think about that and talk to your other?
We thought about that quite a lot because every time the Russians went out on what they called alerts, then we would have to go out, and we were stationed on a ridge. Most of the time they sent us to a ridge in support of the infantry, and it was like maybe a mile on the ridge to the east was the Russian tank battalion.
They were rather close then, weren't they?
Correct, but we were facing our truck vehicles were facing the other way.
Your vehicles were facing away from the Russians?
Right.
Can you explain why, or did
we had 3 days to get to the Rhine. So it took about 3 days to get NATO into operation.
I see.
Our vehicles were facing anywhere, but we had half tracks with quad 50 caliber machine guns mounted on them, and light tanks with twin 40 millimeter anti-aircraft. But we were really in support of the infantry. Those were World War II weapons, and the planes they had at that time, we couldn't have hit one if we tried.
Really? Okay. Can you think of some memorable experiences
Oh,
while you were in Germany?
oh yeah, we had, as I was trained as a fire direction control, when you don't have that anti-aircraft artillery. So they made me battery armorer. I was in charge of all the weapons for the battery. And it was interesting. It was most of the NCOs and officers were south of the Mason-Dixon line, you might say. It was. You got to remember back then so you got to be politically correct here. The blacks and Caucasians were not fully integrated. They had percentages.
Mm-hmm.
They used percentages.
That was a fact of life then.
Correct, it was. And I hate to say it, but some of those southern NCOs, was almost all the sergeants were Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi.
Really?
So some of the boys had a little rough time.
Even though that you never saw combat, were there any guns fired?
Just on training.
Just on training.
Right.
Any kind of injuries or casualties?
Oh yeah, one poor kid, when we were out in the field, the conditions were miserable, and we didn't have tents or anything. We slept under trucks or wherever we could, and one of the kids got ran over by one of those tanks. And
Did they just
frostbite was our biggest.
Frostbite.
Right. Our equipment was not really suited to the kind of weather they sent us into sometimes. But it was, all in all, it was pretty good duty, because when I first went there, we were the Army of Occupation, and about midway, my 18 months there, we became guests of the German government. So we bought all of our food from the Germans, off the market, and the food was excellent. We had some excellent cooks.
Really? What years are we talking about?
I arrived in Germany, like I say, on Christmas, 1953, and I applied for early discharge to go to college, and got out in 1955 in June, I think. Hard to remember. I was so old. May or June.
You have May here, May
Yeah.
55.
Okay.
And you were 21 then when you were discharged.
Correct.
Anything else about Germany that strikes you as interesting, or even mundane? I mean.
Oh, like I said, it was pretty good duty. Although we couldn't get leave all the time we wanted it, and since I was outside the officers, the only one who had a formal education above high school, the captain put me in charge of mundane duties like troop information and education officer, even though I was a corporal. And he made me in charge of the headquarters section, which was the cooks, the jeep drivers, the clerks, and stuff like that. And I'd apply for 2 weeks leave, and he wouldn't let me have it. I could only get a week at a time. But I got to see a lot of Europe. It was cheap travel there.
Is that what you did when you had leave then? Is traveling?
Every day he'd let me have. I took off.
What kind of relationship did you have, like, with the Germans and the local?
That was kind of interesting too. They were very, very friendly. There are 2 reasons for that. One, we spent a lot of money. Number 2, they were scared to death of the Russians. In fact, most of the people I had some friends, German friends, and met some older people, and their sons always fought on the Eastern Front, which I thought was a little amusing.
Any medals or citations or anything like that when you were in there?
No. They gave you the Army Occupation Medal, whatever. I got that.
Okay. Let's talk about maybe your family life. Were you married when you went into the service?
Oh, no.
No?
No, they wouldn't take you in the Navy, ROTC.
Oh, I see.
That was a full scholarship. That was tuition, books, and fees, and $50 a month, living expense. You had to be single.
But you did have family. You may not have married, but you had family in
Oh, yeah, in Peru. Yeah, that's where I was born and raised.
Okay.
I had one brother.
You had a brother in Peru.
Peru, yeah. My dad worked for the railroad.
And your dad was he alive then?
Oh, yes. Yeah. He worked for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad.
Okay. How did you keep in touch with them?
According to my mom, not well. When she got home, she showed me the 7 letters I wrote. She also chastised me because I went to it's a real well-known Rothschild, they make Rothschild China, and I could have gotten an 8-place setting, complete, packaged and shipped to the United States for $80. And when I got back, my mother took me to a big department store in Indianapolis and said, "See this?" And I just looked at it and I said, "Oh, that's not, I could have got it for almost that much." She says, "That's per place setting."
We talked a little bit about what you did when you weren't on duty. When traveling, what other kind of things did you do for entertainment?
You gotta remember, I was 19 years old when I went over there. And bars were fun, but also Munich had the two very interesting museums.
Which museums were those?
You'd have to compare it to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. And like I said, I had some friends. It was real interesting that foreign language was taught in grade school.
In Germany?
In Germany, right.
That would be English then, right?
English.
They were teaching
that
English.
was the main foreign language. You had to take one foreign language, but that was the one. Because if you were out, on leave any place in Germany, and you had a little trouble communicating, all you did was find some kid, and you rarely had a problem with the language. The food was excellent, by the way.
Food was?
Yeah.
What kind of food they have? What was your favorite?
My favorite was what they called a roof steak mit Eier. It was an egg on top of a steak, and all the vegetables were excellent. And so was the beer.
That's what Germany's known for, isn't it?
Right.
And you said you traveled. Some of the places that you remember the most and the most impressive?
Well, I'll start with the least impressive. I had my roommate was the company clerk, and he was a Polish descent, and big guy, but real nice, real friendly, smart. We decided to go to Paris, and we got there and we stayed one day, and we said, let's get out of here. So we took a boat train to London and had a pretty good time. Italy was very interesting too. Went to the lowlands, Holland and Denmark and London, which was some of the sites that were interesting, but the food wasn't too good. We didn't think.
Sounds like you did get to travel quite a bit. Do you recall when your service actually ended then?
Oh yeah, like I said, the food was really good over there. Right now I weigh 135 pounds. When I got out of the Army, I weighed 140 pounds. But when I was in Germany, I weighed 168 pounds.
Sounds like the food was very good. And you said you had applied for early release.
Correct.
Was that a special program that they had?
Well, the Korean War had wound down, and they were discharging them. Although I had a 2-year commitment, if you put in for that, it was almost a given because.
So the truce had been signed by then.
Right.
For the Korean War.
And of course, Congress was stingy with money, so they were downsizing the armed services.
And then once that was granted, how did you get back?
On one of those little bitty slow boats again.
One of those little bitty slow boats again.
Yeah.
A different one though? Just
yes, it was
same
different, but it was still a Kaiser-built Liberty ship.
Okay, when you got back to the United States, what did you do?
Well, as soon as we got off the boat and onto the Staten Island ferry over to New Jersey, they marched us right on a train for what's the port in Chicago? Fort Sheridan.
But you took a train then from New Jersey to Chicago.
Correct, yes.
Were there special programs you had to go through when you left the service?
Yeah, they give you another complete physical, and then you had to sit through a couple of how to be reorientated to civilian life. But first you had to sit through an hour and a half trying to get you to re-up or re-enlist.
Did you give any consideration to that?
No, I'd already filled out my application for Indiana University.
And did you get to go to Indiana University?
Yes, on the GI Bill.
You did go on the GI Bill.
Graduated from there in 1958.
58. And what did you study while you were there?
Marketing with a minor in economics.
Okay. So it took you, what, 3 years?
3 years.
3 years to get through. Did your experience in the service then help you through school then?
Quite a bit, because I was always interested in economics, and their economy over there, well, somewhat similar to ours, was not as market-driven. You didn't know as much advertising as you did. For instance, even, well, in the 50s, advertising was pretty big. TV wasn't that big.
While you were going to school, did you meet, what kind of people were you with? What kind of friends did you make?
Well, that was another kind of amusing thing. Somehow, whoever did the housing assignments at any university, of course, I had to go for the cheapest route. So they had, they were, of course, familiar with Bunker Hill Naval Air Force Base near Peru.
I heard of it, yes.
It's now called Grissom.
Yes, now Grissom I'm much more familiar with.
During the war, that was a Naval Air Force Base called Bunker Hill Naval Air Station, where they trained pilots. And they'd torn down some barracks they had there and put them down at IU. And in this one dorm that housed tutor room, 24, 48 rooms, about 90, say, were all Korean veterans.
Really?
And had dorm parents there, or dorm parents, and he was a young married kid. And most of us were older than he was, and some of the, they threatened him with bodily harm if he didn't stay out of the dormitory, and he didn't bother us. We had pretty good parties there. Illegal, of course.
That's good.
Also, the other students didn't care for us either.
Really? From what you're saying, there were quite a few Korean War veterans attending.
Correct.
On the GI Bill.
Correct.
And you said about 40-some, did you say? Or just in your dorm?
90-some.
90-some in your dorm?
Right.
Okay. And you didn't get along with the other students very well?
Well, yeah, we did, to a certain degree, but as one girl said when she got in this one class and found out there were quite a few Korean vets in there, she opted out because it upped the curve. You know what I mean by that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Once you finished school then, or even before that, did you join any of the veterans organizations?
Yeah, the Veterans Foreign Wars and American Legion.
Do you still belong to those?
No. The ones here in Columbia City aren't that active.
They're not active?
Not as active as they used to be.
What kind of things, when you were participating and they were active, what kind of things did you do?
Well, it was more or less a social club.
More or less a social club?
Yeah, and reduced prices for beer and food.
And then after you finished school, what kind of career did you go into?
Well, I started out, thought I wanted to be a teacher, and I went out to California to take, a master's in education. But I couldn't stand California. Indiana, small town boy out there, too many people. So I came back and went one semester all state and took student teaching, and I found out what they were getting paid and so forth. Then kids that didn't want to learn was the worst thing. It's like you're almost, even in high school, you're a babysitter, so to speak. So I went to work for Stanger Oil.
And what kind of things did you do there?
Marketing.
Marketing. Okay. Your experience, service experience, were you able to draw on that and in your career?
It gave you a lot of insight into people. Of course, I guess maybe I was always a kind of student of people. I spent most of my career as an insurance adjuster. And you have to be able to read people, body language,
Was this while you were employed with Standard Oil?
No. Somehow it just wasn't challenging. What their marketing program. The pay was good, but there was no challenge. I got bored. So then got married and did a few jobs until we got settled in. And I spent 33 years in the insurance industry.
Here, were you in Columbia City then? Did you come back to Columbia City or Peru?
Well, I started out in Indianapolis and then transferred to various places, Lafayette, Indiana, Saginaw, Michigan, and back to Indianapolis. Then ended up in Columbus, Ohio, where I finally ended my career.
Your career in Columbus. Okay. Is there anything that we haven't talked about or I haven't asked that you'd like to add, something that to you that was important?
Well, like I told you, I was a corporal but headquarters section chief, and we didn't get promotions as rapidly because they allocated so many, and of course I went to Korea, and it was probably fair, equitable, because we weren't in any danger there unless the Russians got nervous. And the worn out used equipment they gave us.
Didn't make it easy, did it?
No.
Well, Mr. East, I'd like to thank you for coming in. It was a very interesting story. People can learn a lot from it. Thank you for your experience, and thank you for coming to the library.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.